Blockbuster movie budgets are insane these days. The latest Indiana Jones movie cost over $400 million. Jurassic World Dominion and Fallen Kingdom cost over $600 million before tax incentives. So today I'm going to rank the most expensive movies of all time from the worst and the most insane spend to the best. While I'm talking, be sure to join me down below in the comments section. Let me know which one of these 15 movies do you think it's the most insane that they decided to spend that amount of money to make that film. As we go into this, basically this is a hybrid list of the most expensive movies of all time, both adjusted for inflation and not adjusted for inflation. The two lists weren't terribly different, but if you could merge the two together, you basically get a top 15 list, and that's what this is essentially. And as I rank these, it's based on their overall quality, but also kind of chiming in on the absurdity of spending that amount of money, or did it make sense to spend that much money on these specific projects? And let's get started. In last place, Star Wars Rise of Skywalker with a spend of $603 million to make a movie whose lasting legacy is, wow, how did you make such a bad movie as the close to the Skywalker saga? And this movie is essentially the epitome of what's been wrong with so much of Disney for the last, 7 or 8 years, which is to say they have a property that their pure ego makes them think no matter what we put out, people will like it. Just throw an enormous amount of money at it and we'll just print money. And then they make this film, which had dramatic diminishing returns. It made half as much as The Force Awakens because it wasn't very good. So there was no repeat viewing for the film. So despite it making $1 billion, almost certainly this movie wasn't actually profitable because that $600 million is just to create the movie. It's not to market the movie. And studios don't keep all the grosses. Movie theaters keep half the money as well. And so a $600 million film has to make well over $1 billion to actually be profitable. And this is a movie that just felt like they were knee-jerk reacting to the response to Last Jedi. They were course-correcting. They were duct-taping this thing together. Somehow Palpatine returned and just pandering on every single level as opposed to trying to tell an inspired Star Wars story. Just classic bean counters making the decisions, just every focus groups. There's no storytelling vision or anything like that. And so you get a movie that cost an enormous amount of money and just is cinematic noise that no one responded well to. Number 14, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom with a spend of $582 million. When you remove the tax incentives, this shoots up over $600 million spent to create the movie. Now, I've never particularly enjoyed Fallen Kingdom because the plot of the movie is about dinosaurs going extinct on the island and watching them being burned by lava and drowning. And that's just not what I go to Jurassic World movies for, so I find it very unpleasant. This is by far the least rewatchable Jurassic movie for me. And then after we watch dinosaurs go extinct, then we watch them at a mansion escaping while terrorists are buying laser-guided raptors or something like that.
That's a laser raptor. I thought they went extinct thousands of years ago.
Just really strange ideas. As for the concept of the spend itself, Jurassic World is about as safe of a bet as you've got these days, where these movies make $1 billion. The new one didn't, but it was really close to it, but they cut the spend. The latest Jurassic World movie costs less than half as much as this movie made to create it. Very smart on Universal's part to hire a director that can actually put out a Jurassic movie for a reasonable budget that still looks big and epic. But Jurassic movies are safe bets, so I understand the spend, and the movie does look really good. It's like the CGI and everything is impeccable in the movie. So at least you know where the money's going, and it's for a reasonable thing. It was following up a movie that made $1.5 billion, and it was following up a movie that opened to the biggest opening weekend of all time. Naturally, you get a big budget. Made sense. The script itself that they greenlit, I just don't like this direction for this story at all. 13, Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides with a spend of $529 million. That is adjusted for inflation, as this movie came out 14 years ago. At the time of this movie's release, it was the most expensive movie of all time. And on the one hand, the previous Pirates of the Caribbean movies were wildly successful films. The previous two were right around $1 billion, unadjusted for inflation. So wildly successful films, like making that kind of money that long ago was a huge deal. So made sense that they would spend a bunch of money on the fourth one because it was pretty much a lock to also make a bunch of money. And it did. The movie itself, I think, is the most forgettable of the Pirates movies. Just nothing in it leaves a mark. It's just more pirate stuff. And I think that's one of the other things that kind of is a recurring theme in a bunch of movies on this list, that are the bottom half of this list, is that it was a studio that threw an enormous amount of money at just a mediocre script. That, to me, is where that concept of mid comes on, this word that can be overused, mid. When I think of that, in my mind, it's blockbuster mediocrity, where you're watching something slick, expensive, but just entirely forgettable at its core. The story and all of that, it's just, there's nothing interesting there. It's so mid. That's the concept to me. Not low budget, not cheap, not overtly bad, but really professional, totally forgettable cinema. Today's video is brought to you by HelloFresh. Fall is almost here. That means cooler nights, craving heartier meals, and wanting something warm and satisfying. This season, HelloFresh has had a massive upgrade with their biggest menu yet. HelloFresh has doubled their menu. That means you can choose from 100 options each week. Likewise, you can feel great because their menu is even healthier with high protein and veggie-packed recipes. Here's the part that I love. You can get steak and seafood delivered to your door every week, no extra cost. There's 3 times more seafood on the menu now at no extra cost. I'm not a cook, not a chef. They deliver the exact ingredients in the right proportions with clear directions on how to make these delicious meals. Therefore, even someone like me that does not know what they're doing is able to cook an amazing meal. The best way to cook just got better. Go to HelloFresh.com/SeanChandler10FM now to get 10 free meals plus a free item for life. 1 per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. That's HelloFresh.com/SeanChandler10FM to get 10 free meals plus free item for life. Number 12, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny with a spend of $419 million. A Forbes report recently came out just a couple weeks back reporting the actual budget of this movie. It was reported as like $370 million, and then Forbes was like, actually the spend was like $419 million. Which, if I was only ranking these on the pure absurdity of the spend, this would be number 1 most insane spend, or last place, whatever you want to do. The idea of an Indiana Jones movie costing over $400 million is bonkers to me, and a violation of the principles under which the franchise was started. Like, you can take Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which starred, biggest movie star of the 80s, from the 2 biggest creative, most powerful minds in Hollywood, and to following up 2 gigantic hit movies. Take the budget of that movie, adjust for inflation, double it, and you're still 100 million short of the budget of this film. Adjust for inflation, double it, add $100 million, and you're still not there yet. Like, that's how insane this spend for a movie is. And seeing a stunt double being face swapped with Harrison Ford and people on a green screen train, none of this is the point of Indiana Jones. All the CGI, VFX, that is not the concept of Indiana Jones. And as soon as you do that, you're breaking from the franchise. It turns into this other thing altogether. And, you know, you can get into things I've talked about many times before about the idea of do people actually want to see an old, drunk, lonely Indiana Jones being taken advantage of by someone that he trusted? You can even, the merits of that concept, but just at a face value, Indiana Jones was supposed to be throwback to the serials of the 40s and stunt work and guys being dragged behind things, not VFX, CGI, green screen, digital creations, digital environments. And in doing so, I think you just made a movie that immediately the built-in audience that loves good old-fashioned movies, like in the 80s, Indiana Jones felt good old-fashioned like the olden days. And for a totally different reason, Indiana Jones feels like the good old-fashioned days to people like me. And they converted it into, just another one of these visual effects films. I think that's one of many reasons that people rejected it. But like, this is a film I saw it in the theater. I haven't even watched it with my wife yet. Like, we watch Last Crusade a couple times every single year when it plays in the theaters. We'll go see it in the theater. And she's never even watched it because she doesn't want she doesn't want those memories of Indiana Jones in her head. She doesn't want that to be the end of Harrison Ford's legacy. Next up, Jurassic World Dominion with a spend of $500 million. Once again, if you remove the tax incentives, it skyrockets to over $600 million. And as for the spend, this was a lock to make $1 billion, despite the fact that it was largely rejected by people. It still made $600 million, it still made $1 billion. So in terms of simply, does it make sense to have a really expensive Jurassic movie? Yes, it does. Did it make any sense to spend $600 million, $500 million for this Jurassic movie? Once again, no, it did not. Now, I find this movie dramatically more watchable than Fallen Kingdom. Fallen Kingdom probably has more artistic merit to it. I think Dominion is very ill-conceived from top to bottom on almost every single level, where they just kind of converted into generic blockbuster the movie. Once again, mid, slickness, movie stars, fast-moving, quips, adventure, globe-trotting, totally bland script that wastes all the potential that is in the basic premise of the film. But like I said, I find it more watchable than some of these other ones. Like, I enjoy it well enough, while at the same time being like, how did you waste bringing the two casts together? How did you waste dinosaurs across the entire globe? How did you waste all of this? But it's watchable for me. That's why it's higher up than I know where many of you others would have this one. And on just the spend level, like I said, you can see the budget on screen. It's globe-trotting. It was during COVID, so COVID inflated the budget a certain amount. There's plenty of spectacle, plenty of VFX, and expensive movie stars. Bringing us into the top 10, Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, and this is another one that was the most expensive movie of all time when it came out. This was a little bit of a risk making this one the most expensive film of all time, as they shot parts 2 and 3 back to back. The original movie was a big hit, like a surprise hit, and they went, all right, let's go all in on this. And so they shot 2 movies back to back, and both of them with huge budgets. This one being the most expensive movie of all time. And essentially, it for the most part, paid off in terms of box office. They got a couple more billion-dollar films out of doing this. And the spend on this one, this is adjusted for inflation, is $455 million. And was it worth it? Well, our villain in this movie is still used 17 years later as a point of reference for the best CGI characters of all time. All of these years, like Davy Jones, people go, look how good Davy Jones looked way back in 2007. Davy Jones looked like that. Why do these CGI characters today look so awful? And it was a movie on water. Water's expensive, and crazy CGI characters that are groundbreaking are really expensive. And so they put their money on the screen. They had better CGI 17 years ago, 18 years ago than we have today, and they made a movie out at water. It stood the test of time. So the money's on screen, and it was following up a hit film, and it did make $1 billion itself. As for me, I've never been super crazy about Pirates 2 and 3. They deliver a lot of things that are really cool, but there was just maybe a little bit too much. They're too ambitious, a little bit too full of themselves, and lost some of just the carefree fun of the original for me. So I'm not crazy about At World's End, but absolutely, they put their money on screen, and they created something that stood the test of time. Number 9, Spider-Man 3, total spend $391 million. That is adjusted for inflation. This is a movie that with time, and very much because of my son, has grown on me quite a bit. This is his favorite Spider-Man movie because he loves Venom, and he's still in middle school. Maybe as time passes, his opinions will change a little bit. But I've seen this movie in the theater 2 times in the last year and a half. I saw it in the theater just a few weeks back. And in particular, in an era where there's a lot of comic book movies that just, once again, going back to our word, are mid, and they don't feel like they have much heart to them. I feel like this is a movie that you can feel where they were creatively maybe running on a little bit of empty, forcing some ideas that didn't quite fit, but it still has heart to it. It still cares about the characters. It's flawed. There's pieces that don't really work. There's absolutely the corny factor that goes along with this movie with dance numbers and what they do with Harry, making him this very cheerful idiot when he has brain damage. But it has heart to it, and it still has that Raimi charm to it that is, for me, made it age better. And in particular, with the last 5 years of comic book movies, I go, I don't know. I think I prefer that kind of flawed comic book movie to the modern era of flawed comic book movies. And then on the spend for this one, this is another one. It was following up 2 wildly successful films that were financially profitable. And so the idea is that this would have a huge budget, made a lot of sense. And you see it on screen. The movie's just kind of nonstop, enormous action sequences, the biggest comic book action sequences that had ever been filmed at the time. So this is a movie that made sense to be expensive. I think some of the effects don't hold up the best, but they're not groundbreaking and like have aged wonderfully like Davy Jones from Pirates. But like you see the budget on screen, and it made sense to spend that money on the film. Number 8, Fast X, with a spend of $391 million. This to me is one of the, right there with Dial of Destiny, of just most insane spins on this entire list. Where on the one hand, like, okay, I guess, yeah, the whole movie is ridiculous stuff, but there was just absolutely no way to justify converting the Fast and the Furious franchise into this. I'm old enough to remember when it was about street racing in LA and committing heist. It was Point Break with cars. And then they started getting bigger with Fast 5. And that was the best one, and kind of hit their peak and their stride there. And then it just like spiraled out of control of absurdity, of just like vanity, and the like turning into live action cartoons, to the point that all of a sudden the cast is enormous, and everything is just insane spectacle to it, and cars are in space. So Fast X for me, it's my kind of fast food cinema. Like I still find it fun. The spin is insane. And certainly falls into the category of, this is obviously a dumb script. That's the definition of Fast and Furious movies. Dumb fun with cars. And I'm there for it. I'll be there opening day, whatever they do, because they're always dumb fun. Shouldn't have cost this much. Like, this is crazy insanity that this movie cost this much. And this is the reason that they haven't started working on part 2 of this yet. It's because the studio was like, dude, you got to cut the budget by a lot. We can't do this again. Like, we made no money. We grossed $800 million. We still didn't make money because you spent too much. And they can't figure out how to make the budget smaller on these insane monsters. Number 7, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, with a spend of $351 million. This, to me, is a pretty insane spend. If you look at how much the first Doctor Strange grossed, It doesn't make any sense that the sequel would be one of the most expensive movies of all time. Some of that is he became one of the most established of our Avengers, moving into phases 4 and 5 that was still around. Some of that, it was a multiverse movie coming right after No Way Home. And so then there was the multiverse excitement to it. Some of it, and a lot of it, is COVID, inflation. This movie infamously had an incredibly difficult production and post-production because of COVID and COVID complications, as well as indecisiveness on the studio heads, rewriting the script 33 times. When people hear that it's rewritten 33 times and they go, why didn't you get a new writer if the writer kept making a bad script? Like, no. That's not that the writer wrote a bad script. That's that the producers kept changing their mind. He was a hired gun. They liked what he was doing. They just had him keep rewriting it. That's on the producers, not the writer. But that it creates this insane inflated budget for your movie. On the other side of this, though, this is the second highest grossing MCU film since Endgame, or since 2019, Spider-Man. If you remove Spider-Man movies, since Endgame, this is the highest grossing MCU film. And then the 2 Spider-Man movies grossed more than it. And you go, that's pretty wild. And so you go, I guess it made some sense to spend that kind of money on it because multiverse sells tickets. But also, one of the most expensive movies of all time for a movie that you couldn't decide what you wanted your movie to be? That's crazy. Like 33 rewrites. Elizabeth Olsen talking about how she's like, I didn't even read the script anymore because I couldn't decide.
Then Doctor Strange, like, we know those films often are fluid, and it seems like this one was a bit fluid. Like,
so fluid. I there's a point in making the movie where I just stopped reading drafts. I was like, this is just gonna change again.
Do it, like, spending this kind of money when you don't know what you want the movie to be is crazy. How do you keep your job while doing that? That's the insanity that is Disney these days. Number 6, Avengers Age of Ultron with an adjusted for inflation spend of $484 million. Here's an interesting one on this. The adjusted for inflation version for Age of Ultron is higher than Infinity War and Endgame. I'm not quite sure what that's about because obviously Infinity War and Endgame have much bigger casts and theoretically are much bigger movies. So I don't know exactly what happened with Age of Ultron that the budget ballooned that much when the cast was like half the size of what those other movies were going to be, while being all of them being, of course, epic, gigantic films. I find this to be a flawed film, but like I think people judge it based off their disappointment, not on its overall quality, which is a lot of people watched Age of Ultron and felt like it was a huge downgrade from the first Avengers, which I would agree with. But if you had an amazing, like, A+ theater experience with Avengers, almost anything's going to be a downgrade. So, like, the fact that it's like, oh, that's a disappointment. Disappointment doesn't mean bad. Age of Ultron, still, individual interactions just as good. Individual action sequence just as good. The movie looks, just visually, cinematically, cinematography, much better than the first film. Like, much better. But the story is also overly cluttered, and they tried to have more characters, more plot, set things up, and the movie's slightly shorter. And so I think it's a little confusing because it's rushing through so many plot points. So it's a flawed film, but that doesn't mean it's a bad movie. And I am legitimately, like, I don't exactly know why this movie cost so much more than the first movie, and even more than the other 2 Avengers films. Like, I don't know why this would be the most expensive one that they made. I don't know Baxter or anything like that. But at the same time, the spend made sense because they were following up a wildly successful film and only gaining momentum with this film. Bringing us into the top 5, Avatar: The Way of Water with a spend of $350 million. And in the case of this one, this is one where you can absolutely justify it being one of the most expensive movies of all time. But keep in mind, this movie actually didn't crack the list. Like, I cheated to kind of work it in here. This is why I, like, merged some lists, and the reason why it's top 15 is so that I could add this movie onto the list. Of all of the films included here, Avatar: The Way of the Water was the least expensive of them. the movie that is all CGI, that is photorealistic, and another one of these, like, this is the standard for gorgeous VFX, least expensive of these movies. And it cost $1 million less than Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And I forgot to pick on Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. That's a movie infamous for having some awful VFX. The eye in the middle of the forehead, infamously bad. Other shots in it look great. We pick on the one bad one. But when you have one of the most expensive movies of all time that cost more than Avatar, and you have bad VFX in it, you have no excuses. You did something wrong. You screwed up. There's no excuses when you are given that much money, which with this movie, we know exactly what it was. They kept changing their mind and reshooting and changing, and everything was last minute. So you're not doing the 10th iteration of one VFX. You're doing the 10th version. It's the first draft of the 10th iteration of a concept, not the 10th perfection. And so you just get the rough draft of something, and it looks awful. And that's what that scene was. Avatar: The Way of Water looks impeccable. And it's the least expensive movie on this list. For me, the Avatar films are great theater experiences. They're like immersive IMAX documentaries that happen to be sci-fi action movies. I don't rewatch them at home, really, because I don't think they translate the same. But as theater experiences, they are remarkable and they look amazing. Another important note, the first Avatar's not on this list. And then you got James Cameron spent a decade developing the technology to make Avatar, developing the technology to do underwater Avatar 2. They look incredible. They spent years to make them, and they were less expensive than the other movies on this list. Bonkers. Crazy. And some of that just goes back to certain people are just really talented and given the right context to be able to do incredible work at a budget that actually makes sense. Number 4, Star Wars: The Force Awakens, with an adjusted for inflation spend of $593 million. I imagine if you remove some tax incentives, that probably bumps up to over $600 million. And on the one hand, I will say that they spent $4 billion to do Star Wars, to buy Star Wars, Lucasfilm. It makes sense that they would also spend an enormous amount of money to try and make a movie that looked really cool and was really thrilling and spectacular. And there's lots of practical sets. There's lots of VFX. Everything in it is big. Everything looks expensive. And so the idea of Star Wars, which is a proven commodity that you just look at the point in time this movie came out, every single movie that they'd released had been wildly successful at the box office. We hadn't had one in 10 years. It went on to make $2 billion. I believe it's the highest grossing movie in the United States. So spending an enormous amount of money to make it and try and make something that got fans excited again, it made sense. Absolutely, this one makes sense to me. And despite its reputation somewhat being tarnished by time and by its sequels, this movie did its job of getting Star Wars fans excited again. Like, man, Star Wars is good again. So this one cost an enormous amount of money, but it made sense to spend a lot of money on this movie. It did its job, and it's a fun roller coaster ride of a movie. I think absolutely its sequels have hurt its reputation a lot because they didn't play out any of the potential here in any satisfying ways. But it's still an enjoyable film. In third place, Titanic, with an adjusted for inflation spend of $392 million. This is the only movie on the list that is not from the 21st century. This movie's almost 30 years old at this point in time. When it came out, it, of course, was the most expensive movie ever made at $200 million. This is another one where I wanted to combine the adjusted for inflation and not adjusted for inflation list because this was the movie that got added. You get a movie not from the 21st century if you do the adjusted for inflation. But you only get one movie that is not from the 21st century, and that's kind of the context of where the list came from. James Cameron knows how to make these sweeping epics. And that's what this movie is. Like, it just has this ability to kind of like draw you in to the delusion of the Titanic and the awe and the wonder and the spectacle of you're just on this ship, and it makes it feel so important and so grandiose that you buy into the lie. And then likewise, for the last hour and 15 minutes of the movie, you absolutely feel devastated by the tragedy of Titanic. It is a movie at water, set at sea. It's a movie filled with enormous practical sets and a movie filled with groundbreaking CGI at the same time. It went on to become the highest grossing movie of all time by a lot, like by an enormous factor. So this is one, if there's like one on this list that is like, well, you can't argue with that. It made all the money and it won all the Oscars. No matter how you look at it, James Cameron won. This was a huge gamble. Like, people were like, James Cameron is about to destroy his career he's going to sink with the Titanic, all the puns, everything like that. And then James Cameron proved them wrong and became the king of the box office on like a tremendous level. But so Titanic, amazing cinematic experience. A movie that still plays great watching it at home, and a movie that absolutely justified its budget. Our runner-up, Avengers Endgame, with a spend of $438 million adjusted for inflation. Once again, surprised that this movie cost less than Age of Ultron. Though I don't need to say much about Avengers Endgame, of all the reasons that it's such a great crescendo, pulled all these storylines together, such a satisfying conclusion. The last hour is the greatest fan service of all time. I've said all of that stuff a million times before. On the budget level, once again, this is kind of where you have about the safest bet as you can have. Like, was it a gamble? Sure. Could it have failed? Sure. But I think that was more on a story level. Like, the chances that they would screw up the story, therefore the movie wouldn't be very good and it would underperform in that regards, was a higher chance than the fact that people just wouldn't show up. This movie was going to make a bunch of money opening weekend, almost certainly. And the gamble, once again, was the 1-2 of Infinity War. So if Infinity War was a dud, if people rejected Infinity War, oh crap, now we still have Endgame and people are mad at us. But this is a studio that was only gaining momentum with each release. They were on a creative high. Box office was only going up. And now we're going to create events that the culmination of all of this. All of these franchises as individual ones, plus the Avengers movies as a franchise on top of the franchise. This is the crescendo. It was about as safe of a bet, and a movie where, with a cast this size, well, yeah, of course that's going to be really expensive. But also, it's an event unlike anything in cinematic history. Like, just this, like, if you stop and think about how many movie stars are in this movie, it's insane. Even, like, they joke about the funeral scene for Tony Stark being like the most expensive shot of all time, because it's just people standing there. But there's so many A-list movie stars, there's so many Oscar winners, and you're just going through this one shot of so many expensive faces. But also, it was guaranteed to make $1 billion. But it didn't make $1 billion, it almost made $3 billion. But coming in at number one, Avengers Infinity War, with a total spend of $407 million adjusted for inflation. Once again, everything that applied to Endgame applied to this movie. And I've said everything about why I love Infinity War many times before. That to me, it's just such a fun, all my toys mashing together with Thanos as the secret sauce of having like this villain that is pure evil, but they actually give him some nuance and they make him a multi-dimensional character that feels pain and loss on this quest that he has for his insane plot. But even on kind of the CGI level, in the terms of the MCU, Thanos is the standard that people use. Like, hey, you were able to do Thanos, why can't you put an eye in Doctor Strange's forehead? So our character that runs through so much of it is some of the best CGI they've ever done. And, you know, just a movie that enormous size, scale, spectacle, all of it, multiple planets, huge battles in multiple fronts. all the different stuff that makes a movie really expensive, made sense to be expensive, was a risk worth taking. But I love this movie. It's been my number one MCU film, I guess, since it came out. So once again, here it comes in at number one. Which of these movies do you think was the most insane spin? The movie that had no possible justification to spend that amount of money on such a bad script? Let me know down below in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV to me.